Hello, everybody, and thank you for showing up today on my YouTube channel. My name is Stacy Alden, and this is my channel that I oversee. I initially started it, honestly, as a way to reach out to group fitness instructors and managers and personal trainers, fitness professionals, to help them get better and make themselves better. And then it's evolved into this almost weekly interview series where I interview my favorite experts that I trust and believe in the most, their best practices in the industry, as a live interview on my channel. So if you're new to this channel and you enjoy today's content, I am here with Arundhati, who I will introduce very soon. Please make sure to like this video and then subscribe to the channel as well. So first, welcome Arundhati again. She's been on my channel before. You'll have to check on our past interview all about cultural appropriation of yoga. And Arundhati is, to me, just such an amazing yoga expert, instructor, master instructor, and she teaches instructors how to become yoga instructors, but she's also become really a voice in the industry for yoga teachers and newer yoga practitioners as far as making yoga like applicable to everybody. And she has this podcast called Let's Talk Yoga, and I highly recommend everyone check out that podcast. But what we are speaking about today, and then I'll continue to introduce Arundhati, is our focus is all about the different fads that have started to evolve. They've kind of started to calm down a little bit, but we wanted to address the fads that we're seeing in yoga industry and how they are affecting yoga really as it's viewed in the world. And then potentially we're going to get to also some yoga myths. So there are rumors out there that it's a religion, and there are other myths out there that we want to kind of debunk today or help explain with her help, obviously, as the expert. But I want to continue introducing her. So she also is the owner of a yoga studio, a local yoga studio in Redmond, Washington called Aham Yoga. And we have 2 instructors going through her training right now. She has a 200-hour, a 500-hour yoga training, and it's just an adorable, amazing yoga studio that also has online classes too. So they've just started live classes. We were chatting about that earlier, and they're filling up really fast. But hopefully you can catch some of her classes online. But again, Arundhati, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me back. I'm excited.
So our first question, so really quick, I'll mention some of the fads that we've spoken about before in yoga. So and we've seen goat yoga, which tends to be the most interesting, most popular thing right now. Mm-hmm. And then there's Vinyasa and Vino, or like yoga, and while you're practicing yoga, you're enjoying a glass of wine. There's also, or beer. And then yoga Sculpt, where you use little hand weights, or even rage yoga, which is the most unique to me. It's where, what I've understood is that it's where people are listening to really loud, like rage music while they're doing yoga. And we've already talked about music before. Check out again that podcast or the episode before, but it's like intense, like release all of your anger kind of yoga. So my question for Arundhati after that kind of list of fads are that, and of course I'm sure there's more I haven't spoken about that are out there. Some of your thoughts when you see and hear about these fads, and what are their effects on yoga?
Okay, so I think firstly we have to understand that yoga is very popular, and yoga tends to have a very wide appeal, and it sells well, which is why a lot of these things have gotten added on, and we call them yoga fads, right? Bringing the goats in, bringing the puppies in, bringing the chocolate, music, rage, wine, beer, all sorts of other things. The other day I was watching Shark Tank, and somebody was selling, I saw goat yoga, but I also saw face yoga, where you do some stretches and you contort your face and then you just slap on the word yoga. So because yoga it has a broad appeal, I think a lot of people just end up doing whatever they're doing and then slapping yoga onto it to sell. And because when you say, oh, this new yoga, people will pay attention, at least yoga practitioners will pay attention, and that's a big market. And yoga is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Though all that billions of those that's not going to instructors and studios. That's going to like some big brands and gatekeepers. But the a fad, it's not possible to really attach yoga to any of these fads because yoga is it's a way of living. And you and I spoke about this in that previous interview, right? It's a lifestyle, it's a way of living, it's a way of being. So when we see somebody trying to attach these things to yoga that are external to yoga, it's just gimmicky. It is somebody trying to make a living. And while I really think everybody deserves an equal opportunity to make a living, when we start taking goats and beer and wine and putting those into yoga, we actually appropriate the practice of yoga.
Mhm.
So that's why I think the fads have no place in yoga. I have nothing against a glass of wine or drinking beer. Just do that after your yoga practice. Doing it in your yoga practice could potentially cause you harm. And if you're out of it, slip and fall. That's one side of it. But the other side is it's just appropriating the practice of yoga. So whenever you see any of these things like chocolate yoga, rock music yoga, rage yoga, it's just somebody trying to differentiate themselves in the market. Um,
Mhm.
and that is appropriation, unfortunately. Does that answer your question?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was perfect. Yeah, and I see that some other modalities where like Pilates is a very
Mhm.
important part of the fitness industry as well. It's very different than yoga, but what tends to happen is, like you said, people will slap Pilates onto it
Mhm.
just because there's even, I think it's Pilates and yoga mixed together, like
Bio. I heard
Tayo.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's kind of it's interesting. It's like why not create your own thing versus take yoga and try to
Mhm.
use it as your way of marketing
Yeah.
something. So it's yeah, I see.
And I think a lot of people who do this, right, they are not necessarily yoga practitioners themselves. And they're
Yeah.
probably not even, they're there for the business side of it. Again, I'll go back to that Shark Tank example. When I saw goat yoga being pitched there, firstly, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe somebody brought this concept onto Shark Tank and asked for like money to invest in. But the two people who were there were not even yoga instructors. Like they hadn't even
Mhm.
studied yoga or taught yoga. They were just purely looking at the commercial side of it. And unfortunately, this has done more harm than good. And we have tons of these fads, but you're right. These fads are slowly, I think, going down.
Mhm.
I hope. Fingers crossed.
Me too. And since it is such a lifestyle and the true yoga lifestyle that we've spoken about before, it's I remember when our we were I worked for a larger club, our
Mhm.
marketing department had been interested in the trend or the fad of drinking wine while doing yoga. And what was really interesting is I was against it for a while and then I was like, you know what, maybe this could encourage people to come to yoga. So it was I would believe if you're going to do anything, not necessarily doing it during the class,
True.
not drinking while you're doing a yoga class.
Um,
Yeah.
and while, you know, it's totally fine to have like an event where yoga,
Hmm.
like an asana class, a practice class is part of that event, as long
Hmm.
as we just educate people like, hey, this is the practice, this is what it is, and now we're done with the practice, let's go socialize, let's have community, let's don't mix the two and don't
Yes.
people like I'll give you a glass of wine if you come and do a few poses and then pay me
Hmm.
for that. It's just it's possible. We just have to do it thoughtfully and be culturally sensitive to how we're doing.
I love that. That's so well said. I love that. And then we'll kind of move into the myths of yoga. So the biggest one that we've spoken about before is when people have come to me as a group fitness director. I've had people ask me before, is yoga a religion? And where does that sort of stem from?
So, simple answer: yoga is not a religion. Okay, it sometimes comes across as a religion to some people because they haven't been educated in the entire, like the structure of it. So if somebody sees, say at the start of class, hands closed, palms together, eyes closed, and we're saying Om, it looks like a prayer, right? Like that's how a lot of people would pray, but it's not that, right? It's the if I specifically speak of Om, that's a sound, it's a vibration. But just because we have aspects of yoga that are largely hidden from mainstream, because we only do a lot of poses and physical practice. Sometimes things like certain breathwork practices, certain chanting practices, that just seems like, hey, could this be prayer? Could this be religion? It's not. In teacher training, I like to tell a lot of my students that, do we have one central God or somebody who we pray to? No, we don't. Do we have one main text that, like the Bible or something like that? Do we have one religious book that we follow? We don't. Do we
Mhm.
have a certain prescribed dogma that comes as part of religion? Do we have any of that? No, we have suggestions, we have philosophy, and it's your choice how much you live and what you do. There's no concept of punishment or carrying guilt.
Yeah.
Some of these common things that we find in some religions. So there's no way yoga is a religion. I think we also have to realize that while India has a very rich religious uh, background to it, right? Like we have lots of gods and goddesses and prayer, and it's God is a big part of Indian culture in many ways. But doesn't spill over into yoga. Yoga is a spiritual practice. It's not a religion. So it's anybody can do it and not feel threatened that their religious beliefs are in some way being jeopardized.
Yes, I love that. That's exactly what I was looking for. Because I love how you're right. It's a spiritual experience, like
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a religion. So there's that, and there's yeah, just understanding that it can still be beneficial for your mind and body to get into that. It's almost like a prayer-like state where you're mentally going, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not in, like you had said, pointed to any particular entity or
Absolutely.
God or anything. Mm-hmm.
And it's it's a sacred practice, right? And
Mm-hmm.
religion to a lot of people is a sacred practice.
Yeah.
So it's not it it's all a suggestion in yoga. Like even when we say ohms in class, right? If you don't want to say om, you are more than free to not say it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We tell you what are the benefits of the sound vibration and the exhalation breath and how the sound affects your mind. We speak about all of that, but we're not forcing this onto anybody. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's a very common question. It's a very valid concern for a lot of people, but there's nothing to really worry about.
Mm-hmm. And really, actually, so you had already mentioned a few of them, but what are some of the physical benefits of Om to help
So,
people who are watching understand?
top of my mind, right? Like to give you in like a few seconds, the simplest way to understand Om is a sound, and in Sanskrit language, every alphabet, and there are 52 of them, every alphabet they say vibrates a different part of your body. So when we chant Om, that vibration is very soothing for the mind. And there are studies done on how your brain waves change with a lot of Om chanting, and it brings you into a certain focused, calm zone. And the second reason why I like to use it to start class is we Om on an exhalation. And an
Mm-hmm.
exhalation breath is what we use to calm the mind. So when people are coming from work and traffic, and it's just a good way of that long exhalation. It just settles them down. It calms them down a little bit. The sound vibration gives them energy, and yeah, and that's the most straightforward explanation for all.
I love a really good when the whole class does it together. It's like
Oh yeah,
it's priceless. It's
it is.
so amazing. So if you've never
Full
done it,
vibration.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, if you are watching this right now and you've never done that in a yoga class, I highly recommend trying it because it's awesome. So to kind of wrap things up,
Mm-hmm.
we've spoken about why people think it's a religion. We've spoken about some of the fads and why they exist and why they aren't so great for yoga. But what are some of the suggestions you have for instructors to address fads to their students and help them understand what yoga really is meant for if they get those questions? Like, oh, I went to a goat yoga class. What do you think about it? Kind of thing.
That's a
What
good
should the response be?
that's a good question. It's really making me think. I would say, firstly, we have to just, the teachers themselves have to take a pause and look at how have they been trained. Have they been trained in a way where they've been constantly conditioned for years that yoga is fitness, yoga is a workout, yoga is stretching, yoga is jumping on your mat and doing it in a certain way. Have they constantly just been sold that one aspect? And if
Yes.
that is true for somebody, then I would say, you've actually been cheated. You've lost the opportunity to learn so much more about yoga. Um, because yoga is not the same as it's not a workout, right? As much as we try to put it into a schedule to work out, it's not a workout. So I would ask teachers to first look at how they've been trained. And then if they feel like they have been lacking the lifestyle component, understanding how to live yoga, the philosophy, or even just the history and cultural context, they don't need to be experts, but they need to have some idea. And if they feel like that's been lacking, then I would say they need to go educate themselves before they say anything to their students.
Mm-hmm.
So they're speaking from a point of from an experience that's truthful, and they're more confident about it, right? I think most harm happens when people haven't finished that circle of education in these aspects. That's why we have all these things happening. So
Mm-hmm.
and if they need to go get more education about how to understand this, there are books, there are podcasts, and nowadays in the world of Instagram and Facebook, you can just reach out to somebody and say, hey, can we have a conversation? A lot of people will post about it. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's where you start. Um, and either blogs,
Love it.
connect with somebody, books, listen to YouTube lectures about it. And then once you've gotten a better understanding, then consider sharing what you've learned. And if you are making changes, why you think those are needed. It shouldn't feel like it's a forced punishment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then make a very educated transition if needed. Um, and then just realize that you're going one step closer to what yoga was meant to be. And yeah, it may not be easy for some if they've done it for a really long time, but
Yeah.
I would say just don't let the ego get involved. Just treat this as another thing you learn, and we're constantly learning, unlearning, relearning. So yeah, I would say start with yourself before you go ahead and try to tell somebody else what it's all about.
I love that. That's so good because really, like you mentioned earlier, it's that initial knowledge of what yoga really is, what really the true benefits are, and then does throwing a goat at a person really enhance that quality yoga experience or does it not? So it's kind of, I love that you mention it starts from you because then it's not the blame game of that's not good or that's better than this or not good at all. It's just learning for yourself what yoga really is all about.
I want to add one more thing that I should have told you in the first question or the answer to the first question.
It's okay.
When 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 we add goats and beer and chocolate and other things to yoga, the what is the fundamental part of yoga, right? Yoga is a way of turning in, and it has tools that the breath, the poses, the philosophy, the practice, the mind meditation, all of that we do, it turns us within. So every time we offer somebody a goat or a chocolate piece or some loud rage music, we're taking all our senses out instead of turning them back in. And then we're no longer practicing yoga. We are then doing something else. So
Mm-hmm.
just that's where the fads really go against yoga, taking us
Mm-hmm.
outward while we need to be turning all our senses inward.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
I
what
love
I'm.
it. I love it. I learned so much today. I'm so grateful for you. And I hope those of you who are watching today, you learned a lot too. I'll be sure to kind of watch and monitor the comments. Feel free to throw in a comment if you have any questions for myself or Arundhati. We will reach back out to you. And again, if you're newer to this channel, you enjoyed today's content, please like and subscribe today. And I hope to see you guys again next time. We'll bring Arundhati back for more. Don't you worry. Thank you.